All right, welcome to Frontline. 6 o'clock here on the East Coast. We begin tonight in Washington, D.C., where President Trump addressed the House GOP retreat at the Trump Kennedy Center, speaking to Republican lawmakers for nearly 90 minutes, totally off the cuff, telling the crowd he's basically just given them a blueprint for success. He's right. Also in Minneapolis, federal law enforcement is carrying out the largest immigration operation ever. Acting ICE Director Todd Lyons saying DHS is taking the fight to the sanctuary jurisdictions. Let's go. And in Maine, you remember this guy? The Nazi-tattooed Senate candidate Graham Plattner. He raised nearly $5 million in the fourth quarter of 2025. I mean, good luck with that guy, Maine. But first, how about we tell the experts to sit this one out? Because Donald Trump just gave a masterclass on foreign policy. Let's do this. I love how in the wake of any foreign exercise like we just carried out in Venezuela, by the way, that was literally perfectly done. I mean, it was a perfect flex of a superpower. But right after this, all the internet doctorates and PhDs, they switched from being medical experts, post-COVID to election experts post-November. Now they're all constitutional and international law experts. And I think it's worth addressing because one thing I have found is that the people who claim to be the foremost experts actually pretty much know nothing.
The adults are back in the room.
There was sort of okay, the adults are back in the room.
Yeah.
Simply put, the adults are back in the room.
It's to show that the adults are back in the room.
How'd that turn out? I mean, if Joe Biden's foreign policy shows us anything, he gave our allies more control over us and made our enemies care less about our standing and our resolve. That is why we had to do that raid in the first place. And guess what?
But the United States proved once again that we have the most powerful, most lethal, most sophisticated, and most fearsome. It's a fearsome military on planet Earth, and it's not even close. I've been saying it for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, here's the reality of how the world works for people who think they know, who maybe went to Georgetown or Harvard and hide behind a desk somewhere. Look, I was the guy who was sent in to fix your theory when your white paper was proven wrong by some Islamic nation. China has like 5-year-olds making shoes as slaves, opening mines with 10-year-olds carrying, dirt on their heads for a few cents a day while imprisoning a swatch of Uyghur Muslims in between welding their population's doors shut during COVID. Russia, the relic of the Soviet Union, rolls into whatever country it wants when they sense weak American leadership. Pick a country in Africa with tribes running around with bows and arrows, committing genocide on whatever hated group of the week is. You think they care about rules of engagement? I mean, Russia blew off the Budapest Memorandum in 2014 and then again in 2022. North Korea has starved their own people to such an extent that they've nearly eaten all the bugs in their country. There's no crickets at night. Iran condones child brides and throwing gays off rooftops and chants death to America in their streets. You think these people give a damn about international law and treaties? No. So why should we care about the approval from them or those same treaties? Or even actually the disapproval from allies like the EU High Representative of Foreign Affairs. That's an actual title that I could not care less about. They let Europe get run over by the very people who are raping their daughters and breeding them out of their own countries. These are brutal truths. That's why I don't care about Europe and their opinions, because they bend the knee to all the things that hate them, while their culture and their economies and even their dignity are just getting ravaged all over the continent. And then they lecture us on how we should be more like them and more progressive. Hard pass, Euros. I think Trump and Reagan are like the only people since we dropped the atom bomb to actually understand this, that there is really only one thing that matters.
We will continue to seize the boats that are sanctioned with court orders. We will continue to do that and potentially other things until the things we need to see addressed are addressed. Because ultimately, above everything else, we care about elections, we care about democracy, we care about all of that. But the number one thing we care about is the safety, security, well-being, and prosperity of the United States.
Yup. And we don't give a damn if that means removing dictators shipping drugs that kill our children to, and allow adversaries to install missile installations near our shores. You see, you can have all the agreements and international treaties and statesmanship you want, but none of that matters if you have more guns in the end. And we have a lot, so we don't have to listen to anyone else, because we have 11 aircraft carriers that run on nuclear power plants, carrying more planes each than most countries' entire air forces. This is what is lost on all these experts on the internet, and especially in the self-proclaimed experts in Biden's cabinet that gave us like a myriad of foreign policy failures. I'm not even going into Afghanistan. I'm going to say this louder for the people in the back with the fancy degrees, maybe served as like an ambassador's aide somewhere or whatever. The countries that cry the most about standards and statesmanship are generally the people that can't defend themselves. This is why I think NATO is worthless. All these countries, these European countries specifically, not contributing their allotted amounts, they all talk tough like a little chihuahua, backed up by America, the Mastiff, standing right behind them. How many European leaders either outright just condemned Trump for removing Maduro after saying that he had to go for years? Prime Minister of Spain straight up condemned it. French foreign minister accused of circumventing international law. Mexican president, absolutely, she lost her mind. And she asked the UN to step in. Okay, good luck with that. All these people who are supposed to be allies or friends or partners, France, Germany, the UK, the whole EU delegation, were all like, yeah, I'm glad Maduro's gone. And then they proceeded to talk and lecture us and try to tell Donald Trump he doesn't know how things work. He should have more respect for international. Shut up. And I don't have to listen to them. Obviously, Russia and China hated it because for the first time, I think they actually realized they're like, one, Trump will use our massive military, and two, they suddenly realized they could be next. But more importantly, it showed the priority that is now being deemed the Monroe Doctrine, victory through violence. This is a play on the Monroe Doctrine of 200-year-old foreign policy of President James Monroe, launched in 1823, that basically opposed European or other influences in the Western Hemisphere, specifically in South America. Now, the Trump administration posting, this is our hemisphere. Yes, thank you. And they also know we'll back it up. Our adversaries like China and Russia, who, by the way, provided most of the air defenses that we blew up this weekend, their main edge against us for decades has been that America abides by international law and they do whatever they want. We had this problem in Iraq, rules of engagement. Terrorists were running around and planting roadside bombs, slapping suicide vests on little kids. Well, we're not supposed to fire until fire upon. Well, my group had very more lax ROEs, but that's how it went for most forces. This is the Monroe Doctrine. You want to play games? We can too. You want to do whatever you want? Well, then we can also say, who gives a darn about international law? I, much like Trump, to a greater extent, obviously, am really tired of tiny little countries who reap the benefits of America's defense blanket, especially you, Canada. They all want the benefits of America as their ally and superpower with our trillion-dollar defense budget so they can provide unlimited benefits for whoever and whatever. But they get their panties in a bunch when we actually flex our muscles because someone was taunting us, which Maduro did. Yet, these are the same people who just blindly support endless conflict in Ukraine, that we all know Ukraine can't win, but they still want billions of dollars for it. It's all a grift. I mean, look, my point is that I don't want to start any new wars, okay? I certainly don't want to go fight wars on other people's behalf. But I am done having a bunch of beta countries that don't back us up anyway. They contribute little more than a rowboat to the international fighting force, don't pay anything close to what we do, trying to tell us how we should manage our military and even our adversaries. Constant whine, this is why the world hates America. No, it's why you Frenchmen hate America. Maybe, just maybe, if we did a little bit more of this, and at least our enemies would probably fear us a little bit more, don't you think? Which would keep the world in probably a better place. I mean, no one feared us under Obama. ISIS was created. No one feared us under Biden, and Russia invaded Ukraine. China flew balloons over America, broke international laws, violated trade embargoes, and whatever else. Look, it's a brutal world. And every once in a while, instead of sending some stupid, sternly worded letter with a wax seal on it, we got to send a bunch of commandos to kick in your door and drag you into a helicopter in the middle of the night in handcuffs. And if that violates international law, well, find someone else to enforce it. General Michael Flynn is former national security advisor for President Trump. Sir, honor to have you on. Big change in foreign policy in the last year, sir.
The quote of the night is "no crickets in North Korea." I cracked up on that one. Yeah, I think this, what people need to understand is the strategic consequences of us not doing this mission. First of all, to our military and the capabilities that were put on display in the last 48 hours. I mean, these are exquisite capabilities. These are the best of the best. I mean, the fact that nobody was killed is just it's an amazing accomplishment. And of course, they accomplished their mission. So of getting the precious cargo himself, Maduro, off the ground. The strategic consequences of the Americas, and this is why, and I'll throw in Greenland, right? The Panama Canal, the critical and key straits of the Caribbean, right? The key strait between the island of Grenada and the northern coast of South America. I mean, all of these places matter. The Arctic. So when Trump starts to talk about, what we're going to do in South America or in our hemisphere, everybody needs to understand that there's a much greater play here, right? We are not going to allow China or Russia to have beachfront property in Caracas. Okay, we're just not going to allow. We cannot allow. It's well beyond just the drug smuggling, which is devastating in and of itself. A reminder to all Americans that watch this show. I think it was over 200,000 died of fentanyl. Now we could say, well, not a lot of fentanyl comes out of there. Well, you really don't know. It's not just the fentanyl, but it's also the other drugs. It's also the other man-made capabilities and drugs that come out of places like Venezuela that are marshaled through there. But again, a reminder of what's in Venezuela. I mean, beyond the natural resources and the rare earth elements, Russia, China, Iran, Hamas. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
General, the other, sorry to cut you off, sir, but there are people on the Republican side, Rand Paul, who, by the way, I align a lot with Rand Paul. I don't agree with him on everything, but he's disappointed in the president's actions. Listen to this real quick.
It's one of the things that's always brought me back to my support for Donald Trump is his repeated over and over again saying he wasn't for regime change. It's what attracted me to this wing of the party that was not George Bush. There's at least 2 dozen videos of the president campaigning saying he's against regime change. He campaigned against Hillary Clinton, for her support for regime change. So it's a disappointment. It's a grave disappointment.
Well, I wouldn't call it regime change. I would, let's use a Democrat term here. Undocumented personnel removal.
Right, that's a good one. It's a, and I heard Rand Paul earlier today too, talking about the president should have come and gotten permission to do something, right? And I don't disagree with some of that, but the problem with when we start to take a very sensitive operation like this, that's going to put American troops' lives on the line, in a very, very difficult, complex operation. You got to be so careful about who knows about a particular mission like that. Right. So there's a sensitivity that goes with that. I don't disagree with Rand Paul, his suggestion about, well, the president should come and get some type of, a recognition or give Congress some type of recognition, but he doesn't have to tell all the details of what he's going to do. He kind of did that when he put the Armada down in the southern part of Gulf America anyways. I mean, we that's a given that we were going to conduct operations, and we were doing, we were taking care of ships, we're going after the fishing vessels. So I don't disagree with all of that. But what I do disagree with, and in Rand Paul's case, is that, and he knows this, we've got to be so careful when we are going to conduct operations like that. Trump gave Maduro more opportunities than he probably should have to say, get the hell out of Dodge. Otherwise, we're going to come after you. And
also, he's alive. We could have just drone striked him ahead over the.
Exactly.
General, I got to leave it there. I appreciate you very much, sir. Thanks for fighting the good fight.
Absolutely. Thanks, Carl.
All right, I want to bring in Dakota Meyer, Medal of Honor recipient. Dakota, you've had a couple thoughts about this yourself. You say actually good things, but also look out for some things.
Yeah, look, I think what we did was absolutely incredible. I think how we did this, I think hopefully President Bush is sitting back and he's watching and seeing how maybe he should have done Iraq, right? But, how we performed this and how we did this. But I think what we do need to watch out is what comes next. This isn't the end of it. What's going to happen with Venezuela. I think we got to handle this with very, very strategic aspect of it, or it could fall into worse hands. And then what do we do, right?
We do it all over again.
Yeah, well, it gets harder every time you do it, though, right? That's that that just as well as anybody is. Next, they watched everything that we just did, and they're going to be prepared for it next time. So, I don't know that we're going to get as lucky next time, and we do have the best on the planet. But I think what we need to watch out for is what happens next when you look at the Chinas and the Russias, right? Like, is this going to be the justification for China to say, look, you know what? Like, if America's doing this, then why are we not going to go ahead and use this as an excuse to take Taiwan, right? And so, but this is part of being the leaders of the free world. This is part of being the strength of the globe. And so, I think what we did was absolutely right. I think how we did it was perfect. But I just think that, we as America just need to decide, do we want to remain the superpower, and do we want to remain, making sure that we're setting the standard of this, or do we want to allow someone else to do it? Because don't kid yourself. What's going to happen is going to happen no matter what. Right. It's just a matter of if you're prolonging the inevitable, right? And so we can either stay on the offense or we'll be on the defense, and we've seen how that works.
Well, that's the thing. Like, Xi Jinping, like, he's there forever. Like, we get 4-year terms with our president. So you're absolutely right on that. But, to General Flynn's point about Congress and the leaks in Congress, my congressman in Connecticut, I know I live in the worst, but Jim Himes, he thinks that, all this stuff should have been run through Congress. And I'm like, dude, you guys leak like sieves. Let's listen to him real quick.
What, in your view, should the administration have done in dealing with you?
Well, so the leaks argument is crazy, right? First of all, even if there are leaks, the law says that we have to be involved and consulted on this sort of thing.
It's not war, though.
Yeah, no, look, when you look at this, there's a difference between facts and opinions, right? And look, that's why we have 3 branches. Let's go back to, middle school government, right? You have 3 branches, and it's called checks and balances. Not one has to get approval from the other, because nothing would happen, right? Look, the president acted well within his rights. What he did, we didn't invade. We keep going back to this Monroe Doctrine. They keep throwing all these aspects out there. Like, none of it makes sense, right? I call it factual blending, and this is what people with opinions do. Like, yeah, you have a side and a stance that you can argue, but look, there's a law, right? There's a process. They've tried to do this with everything the president has done. They've tried to undermine it. I think what the bigger problem that we need to look at here is, I think it would be awesome if the president could have gone to Congress, right? Like, how awesome would that be if we had two branches of our government being able to work together and trust each other, right? The simple foundation of a relationship and communication, but they can't, right?
I think that's actually the golden point of the hour, which is we don't trust people in Congress from our executive branch. Dakota Meyer, I got to leave it right there, brother. Appreciate you coming on. We'll see you soon. All right. Coming up, the Ma'am Danny era begins now with all eyes on the Big Apple as he brings in his Muslim ideology with him. Okay, we're going to break that down in a bit. But first, it's been 5 years since January 6th, the biggest political persecution in American history. And despite all the evidence to the contrary, the Dems are still calling it an insurrection. Andrew Klavan joins me live next.
Whenever news breaks. A lot of destruction there. It was really the front lines in the battle. And wherever it happened.
Humanitarian corridors opened up this morning.
We're trying to go rescue a 96-year-old lady that doesn't have anybody to take care of her.
They're using ingenuity. They refuse to give up.
That's incoming fire. Come on. Yeah, let's get down here.
Newsmax is there for you. This is the story of the one who doesn't just see a broken dock. He sees lost revenue, a late night, and work stalled to a halt. Thankfully, he has the experience to handle whatever comes his way and has Grainger on his side, offering access to technical product specialists and the scale to deliver fast, so he can keep his business in gear and always moving forward. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
It's not just your hearing. For us, it's your life. That's why we created the Miracle Ear Way, offering unlimited care, including risk-free trials and free servicing to keep you connected with your loved ones at all times. Call 1-800-503-7789.
Anybody who's struggling with alcohol should try Or Health. Within a week, the cravings were completely gone. Or Health is safe, science-backed, and it works. I couldn't believe how easy it was. Alcohol doesn't run my life anymore.
Text Newsmax to 710-710 to learn more.
Hey guys, Viagra is not your only option. Rove Sparks act fast and stay active longer. They aren't pills. Sparks dissolve under your tongue to reach your bloodstream for speedy results. Connect with a provider at rove.co/sparks.
Not again.
Your cold is coming! Your cold is coming!
Thanks, Revere.
We really need to keep Zycam in the house.
Only if you want to shorten your cold. When you feel a cold coming, shorten it with Zycam.
All right, so today marks 5 years since the Libs attempted to stage a riot on January 6, 2021, the day the mainstream media still calls an insurrection. But for millions of patriots, it was the day they peacefully stood up against election fraud and got shot by paintballs and tear gas before a single person ever entered the Capitol building. Over 1,500 Americans were prosecuted in the largest political witch hunt ever. Grandmas were jailed for praying inside the Capitol after being let in where they walked between the ropes unviolently. Veterans were locked up for years without trial. Ashley Babbitt, an unarmed Air Force veteran, shot dead while climbing through a window. Her family settled for millions last year, but no justice for the officer involved ever happened. I mean, the left put every cop on trial they could during the BLM movement for social justice claims. The one cop who shot a veteran didn't face anything. Democrats thought they had Trump dead to rights with his involvement, and they wasted no time unleashing a coordinated barrage of lies that Donald Trump incited an insurrection, even though he said peacefully and patriotically. MAGA supporters are domestic terrorists. In fact, they had such a good case that they actually deleted the evidence from the Jan 6 committee, which is a federal crime. They had Cassidy Hutchinson lie under oath, still not charged. The 274 agents or assets or whatever the FBI had secretly placed in the crowd, we still have no idea who they are or what has happened to them. In fact, the case was so good that they had to pardon the entire investigative committee. Host of the Andrew Klavan Show, Andrew Klavan himself. Sir, what a debacle.
A total debacle, and it's bigger than that. Happy New Year, Carl. It's good to see you.
You as well.
But it's even bigger than January 6th, because we could talk forever of this guy did that and this guy did that, and I'm sure there's terrible things were done. But this is all about the failure to take seriously Donald Trump's charges that the election was stolen. I'm not even saying that it was stolen. What I'm saying is the press covered up any attempt to investigate whether or not it was. And this was after the Democrats used COVID to change election rules to make it much easier to cheat. And the New York Times covered this by calling up people in government and saying, was there any cheating? And they said, no, there wasn't. And they declared this the safest election ever. So you've got a bunch of very, very frustrated American citizens saying maybe our power, our sole power, which is the power to vote, was taken away from us. And there's nobody except Donald Trump to stand up and call it out. In fact, almost every mainstream news source was saying that his accusations were unfounded or untrue. And unfortunately,
those that weren't were sued.
It was just, and his legal team, I think, did a bad job in making the case in the way it should have been made. But still, you have these people who were incredibly frustrated. It all built up to the stage that it did. And at that point, they start talking about, oh, this is an insurrection, which was complete nonsense. I mean, if that's an insurrection, they don't want to see what an insurrection would look like if Americans really took that on.
400 million guns on our side, basically, and we didn't bring one to the Capitol that we know about. All right, take a listen to, though, Eric Swalwell. This guy's deranged. He's just going into Jan 6 all in. Roll it.
We remember. We don't look away. We treat the day with the same reverence, the same sorrow, and the same resolve as the day the towers fell.
I'm sorry, 9/11 to... Shut up, dude.
Well, I hope he whispered that to his Chinese spy mistress when he was going off on that routine. They compared it to the Civil War. I mean, it really was. It was like Hitler using the Reichstag fire to seize control. Taking this incident, which like I said, there may have been mistakes made on both sides, but the bigger picture is that the media, our media, is so corrupt, so incredibly corrupt, that they couldn't even look at the story with a cool eye and say, well, you know what? Let's see if Trump has anything to say here. Let's investigate this. They did what they just did to Nick Shirley, the guy who exposed the Minnesota fraud.
Yeah.
They tried to take the guy who actually reported the story and make him look bad.
Right.
And they do it by calling government officials and asking them, are you doing anything wrong? And the government official says, no, we're not.
Yeah.
And they go, that's the story.
It is really unbelievable. And then we've come to find out the 315,000 uncertified votes in Georgia. But Andrew Klavan, I got to leave it right there, sir. We appreciate it.
Good to see you.
All right, it's happening, folks. California is now under full federal investigation after the Trump administration confirmed up to $76.5 billion in taxpayer money just gone and stolen. President Trump posting on Truth Social, under Gavin Newsom, the new scum is more corrupt than Minnesota. If that's possible, the fraud investigation of California has begun. Is Gavin Newsom cooked? Host of the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton show, Buck Sexton himself, sir. $32 billion in just unemployment fraud.
The number's just going to keep getting bigger, and what you're going to see is that this isn't just a case of people making mistakes within the government. They knew about a lot of what was going on. You know, at what point is it turning a blind eye, and at what point are you complicit, right? I mean, we've seen some of this certainly with the Somali Leering Center in Minneapolis, which was getting millions of dollars to do, I guess, education at some level and daycare for kids. They should have checked their spelling on the sign, you would think. But the point is, there's so much fraud within the system that it almost becomes, I think it does become clear to anybody observing or looking into this, that this is what they expect, that this is the cost of doing business, as Tim Walz, I believe, said early on before he said he was not running for Minnesota governor. This is what Democrats do. They go after the productive element of society as aggressively as possible, whether it's J6 or it's the tax authorities, the IRS coming after you, and then the welfare state gets bigger every day.
Yep. And, I mean, but this Minnesota fraud, it's like this ripple effect, because Utah, this is coming out. This is, I bleep you not, the Kafi Musa Daba Nuba Daycare Center in Utah. What? Okay. Receives tax dollars and says they cater to kids who speak Arabic. And here are the hours. Put those hours back up. They're only open, Buck, from 6 a.m. to 6:15 a.m.
Oh, man, that's great work if you could get it. You show up for 15 minutes, you get a couple of $1 million of government money or whatever it is. In fact, Carl, this is even crazier than a lot of people realize. If you look at the almost 100 people that have been that have already been indicted over the fraud in Minneapolis. Now, indicted, as we know, that doesn't mean not only have they been convicted, but who knows what kind of sentence they'll hand down in the People's Republic of Minnesota if, in fact, something happens. But there were people who just saw this as an entrepreneurial fraud opportunity. One of the guys who got charged in Minneapolis showed up from, I think it was Philadelphia. He goes, wow, setting up a daycare there and just getting checks in the mail and doing nothing is so easy. I'm going to take this show on the road.
Yeah.
This just shows you there's no effort whatsoever to pay any attention to the tax dollars that are being spent by the billions on these programs.
Yeah, but, and I got about 30 seconds for you here, but a Georgia state senator, okay, a Democrat, Karen Bennett, federally charged for taking $14K in COVID-era unemployment. But I mean, you cannot make this stuff up.
Well, that's actually a phenomenal U.S. attorney there, appointed by the Trump administration, a U.S. attorney, Theodore Hertzberg, I believe, who's the one out of Atlanta. And he takes a very straightforward approach, which is if you're a public official and you violate the public trust and you commit a felony, you're going to be prosecuted. Now, Carl, that shouldn't be a crazy idea.
No.
That's the way it should be. But now it's, you know, if you haven't murdered 100 people, you can just expect to get away with it, especially if you're a Democrat. So that's where things are.
I'm shocked that this judge finally resigned who got charged for letting the illegals out the back door. Buck Sexton, pleasure, my man. Appreciate it.
Hey, great to see you.
All right, coming up, there's now scientific evidence for the thing I've been telling you for years. This is so good, guys. Culture Clash coming up.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.
My cell phone bill kept going up. I started looking around, what are our other options? With Consumer Cellular, I'm saving over $50 a month. Same coverage, same data, same talk, same cell phone, simple.
So why am I paying way more for a big wireless plan? What am I getting for my money?
Consumer Cellular gives you the same fast, reliable nationwide network for up to half the cost of big wireless.
Same tower, same coverage.
I feel like people should know that.
They cut my bill just about in half.
I'm saving almost $100 a month.
That's over $1,000 a year.
Not only did I save money, but our coverage was vastly improved. It was fantastic.
There's got to be a catch, and I'm going to find it by going straight to the CEO himself, Ed Evans. What's up, Ed?
Because we serve primarily the 50-plus market today, we know our customers are going to use a lot less data. We can then set our pricing substantially lower than what the big three are able to do on the exact same networks.
Oh, I love that.
My job is to help you save money on wireless, even if you're on an unlimited plan.
My bill with the big carriers was over $300, and with Consumer Cellular, it's about $100.
Our customers ranked us #1 in network coverage satisfaction. And there's no long-term contracts.
When I look at what I had with Verizon, I'm not sure what I was paying extra for.
And yes, you could keep your number, no problem. Want to bring your phone? That's great too. We'll have you wrapped up in about 20 minutes. Really.
We hadn't gone back. We're not going back. We're with Consumer Cellular.
Call now and see how one of our U.S.-based Switch Pros can cut your bill by up to half. That's right, up to half. And when you call right now, you'll get your second month free. Just use the code SECONDFREE. And AARP members save even more. Call 1-800-918-0560. That's 1-800-918-0560.
I'm an artist, and I'm in my studio. I'm hearing the ads about Relief Factor, and I've got pain in my neck, and it's getting worse, and I'm thinking, well, I'm going to go ahead and order this. 2 weeks later, and I've got much better range of motion. I'm able to carry these big canvases around. I'm just very, very grateful that I gave the product a try.
If pain is affecting your life, give Relief Factor a try. Call or go online. Get your 3-week quick start for only $19.95. Fight pain naturally with Relief Factor.
Inflation and economic uncertainty have affected all of us. But if you have a structured settlement or annuity, J.G. Wentworth can help you get a lump sum of cash now in exchange for some or all of your future payments. J.G. Wentworth has helped individuals get over $290 million in the past year alone. So why live month to month in these uncertain economic times? Call J.G. Wentworth today at 877-CASH-NOW and get the cash you need now from your structured settlement. Call now.
Lock in 50% off for 1 year when you subscribe to the Whole Health System.
Oh, well, turns out giving testosterone to libs makes them more conservative. This is what I've been saying forever. Libs have lower testosterone. Now, there's, of course, scientific proof. Some PhD that I can't pronounce at Claremont Graduate University published an essay called Testosterone Administration Induces Red Shift in Democrats. Researchers tested 136 young males' testosterone levels. They asked them their political affiliations and then gave them either a placebo or testosterone. And the next day, they tested them and asked them again about their beliefs. Their baseline measurements found that staunch self-identified libs had lower T than anyone else in the sample pool. And after dosing those guys, they found out that men who had previously expressed weak affinity for the Lib Party felt even less connected to Democrats and warmer towards Republicans. That is so weird. Smythe, Newsmax contributor, Tony Katz, hosted Tony Katz today. Tony, weird, huh?
Well, I've never been a liberal, so I don't know what that feeling is like. But one can make a kind of rational argument that so much of liberalism is follow the leader, so much lockstep kind of thought process there, that whether you want to attribute it to low testosterone, as this study shows, or maybe other doctors would see it differently, it's more about if you feel stronger in yourself, stronger in your soul, stronger in a belief system, something about seeing a future and seeing a way forward that isn't connected to what other people approve of you. Right. You might find yourself being someone who shies away from a party that decides if they don't approve, they'll destroy you. So I think is a really interesting and very truthful analysis here.
It's wild. And Kay, many people may not know this, but you actually have a degree in the climate studies area, okay? And I want to just share how we know that climate change is a grift, because nobody outside of you has probably ever heard of someone named Dr. Judith Curry, because she's a climatologist with over 140 scientific papers and books and evidence and everything's backing up these conclusions that says that climate change is a hoax. And no one's ever heard of her, but everyone's heard of Greta Thunberg, the autistic high school dropout who just screamed at a bunch of globalists.
Yeah, everyone's heard of the screechy little girl throwing a tantrum, but no one's heard of the scientist. What a surprise, said no one ever. I think the best part about this, Carl, is like literally the first day of my climate change course and the last day, my professor reiterated to the entire class that we go through this as a planet all the time. There are cycles called the Milankovitch cycles because the planet doesn't just do one thing all the time. We fly around space like it's going out of fashion. It changes on, anything from like a couple of 100,000 years to even longer cycles that influence. We currently live, Carl, in one of the calmest moments of global climate in literally all of recorded history. And that's going back through all the proxy data.
Yeah.
So I'm sad. I'm glad that you are now promoting this wonderful woman on television. She more than deserves it.
Yeah,
I love that.
Real quick, Tony, Geraldo Rivera, too, weighed in on this Mark Kelly debate over whether or not he should be facing these consequences. And I'm like, dude, you gave away troop positions in 2003. Maybe sit this one out.
First, I really didn't know that Kay had any history or connection to climate scientists. That's amazing stuff. Secondly, Mark Kelly is lucky if the only thing that happens to him is a demotion. He should have been thrown out of the Senate. I think he should have been charged. He absolutely was trying to tell troops, don't listen to the commander-in-chief. A demotion, that's just pure luck. He's getting off easy.
Yeah, exactly. But, I mean, whatever it is. We got to leave it right there. Short on time today. Tony, Kay, always a pleasure.
Thanks, Carl. Happy New Year.
All right. Coming up, if it isn't the consequences of electing a Muslim Democrat socialist mayor, a new report claiming that some NYPD recruit doesn't want to salute the flag anymore. We got that next.
I switched.
I switched.
I switched.
I switched to Newsmax.
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 Have you made the switch?
You bet I did. My whole family switched.
Millions are switching to Newsmax. You should too.
I'm Elmer Heinrich, the 91-year-old formulator of Immuno 150, an incredible nutritional supplement. There's nothing like it. Now, Immuno 150 is different because it contains 70 plant-derived minerals and 80 other nutrients. Dr. Linus Pauling, known for vitamin C, was instrumental in convincing me to get into the mineral business in 1983. He said the world is sick due to a lack of minerals in topsoil. He said the body needs 60 minerals, but the average food and supplement has no more than 12. That's the reason for Immuno 150. Since its inception, it has had a powerful impact on the lives of thousands of people who could not get any help from various supplements they took or their doctor. Now, I suggest you try Immuno 150 to see what 70 minerals, CoQ10, and 80 nutrients can do for you. Look at the videos on our website. Millions have. Now, consider placing an order for Immuno 150 online or call our toll-free number. I know you'll be glad you did.
Joining us is Dr. Drew from the Wellness Company with advice for dealing with seasonal colds and flu. Doctor?
Cold and flu season is here, and every year your loved one gets sick. Your doctor can't see you. Waiting in a crowded urgent care is brutal. This is a particularly bad cold and flu season, and it's why doctors suggest every family needs an emergency medical kit. Your medical emergency kit is filled with essential prescriptions. It includes antibiotics like generic Z-Pak to get well faster, amoxicillin for pneumonia, strep throat, ear infections, plus prescriptions for nausea and UTIs, and even ivermectin. It's easy. Just match your symptoms to the prescription in your guidebook or call the telemedicine doctor standing by. Take your medication early and feel better faster. Having a medical emergency kit is like having an urgent care in your home. No waiting to see a doctor, no lines at the pharmacy.
Smart advice. We've shared the website and discount code below to save viewers $45. Order now and your kit will be rushed to your door. Thank you, doctor.
A new year brings new threats, and Cyberman's ready for every one of them. While hackers plot their next move, Cyberman's already there, protecting families, businesses, and governments before danger can strike. This year, protect what matters most with easy-to-use award-winning protection. With PC-Matic, you get American-made protection that's faster, smarter, and stronger. Start 2026 with confidence. Visit PCMatic.com today.
This isn't your average pill. This is Rose Sparks. Rose Sparks. Rose Sparks. Rose Sparks.
Rose Sparks is a fast-acting solution because it dissolves under your tongue.
Rose Sparks.
Guys, get started today.
Connect with a provider to find out if Rose Sparks are right for you.
Set sail toward fast asthma relief with Brethora.
$300 for a refill?
Don't pay that. Use Single Care. Look up your prescription, show the coupon to the pharmacist, and save.
See why more people are saving with Single Care.
Ring in the new year with a kitchen designed to wow. Explore our quality kitchen cabinet collections to find the well-crafted style you want for less with 0% APR for 48 months. Hurry, offer ends soon. Only at Cabinets to Go. Designed to wow.
All right, we're only 6 days into Socialist Mayor Mamdani's New York City takeover, and according to the new report, an NYPD Muslim recruit is now demanding an exemption from saluting the American flag, saying, "I will only praise Allah." Not in my country, pal. You can get lost as far as I'm concerned. The salute is not some sycophantic sign of oppression. It's a sign of respect and for the sacrifice that goes behind the flag. That's why only people who have served in uniform are technically authorized to do it, because it's a privilege, not a punishment, you jagaloon. Good luck, New York. New York City Council member, Minority Leader Joann Ariola. This is insane to me.
It's truly insane, and it's rich, because I know that a lot of reasonable accommodations were put in for religious exemption for a jab for COVID-19 that was unproven. It didn't work, and yet people were told you had to get it and they had to lose their jobs. I am a practicing Catholic. I can kneel before the cross, and I can salute the flag and put my hand over my heart and say the Pledge of Allegiance. That's being an American. That's not giving up your right and freedom to worship any way you want.
Yeah.
The flag is a symbol that gives you that freedom.
Yeah.
And that is why you have reverence for the flag. Because of that flag, we can have so many different religions that we can participate in.
Yeah,
so I call BS on that.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. That drives me absolutely up a wall. But not only did we see the new mayor get sworn in on Quran, but he lit the skyline up in honor of the new Muslim Awareness Month. And now we have the call for prayer blasting in a city that said they'd never forget. I mean, like this, the entire time I was overseas, like, They were not this blatant about it in Iraq, and yet here we are in downtown New York.
Yeah, it really, what got me most was that the Freedom Tower was lit in green. And quite honestly, the only colors that should be on the Freedom Tower is red, white, and blue. End of story. There were a lot of people who had lost their loved ones at 9/11 and thereafter that were quite upset over the Freedom Tower being turned green. Red, white, and blue. It is a Freedom Tower. And I have a large Muslim population in my community. And yes, sometimes the call to prayer gets loud, but I get on the phone, I call the imams, and I ask them to be good neighbors. And that causes them to lower it. And when it goes up again, I make that call again. So how does that stop? With good leadership. We have to have people that can work with other people, like myself, that could make that call. Yeah. But while we have a Democratic Socialist sitting at City Hall and in Gracie Mansion, we're going to come across a lot of these problems along the way. And the only way we're going to be able to combat it is by, God, hope we elect a Republican governor.
Yeah, well, it's one of these things, like all these Democrat socialists had all these promises, and now they're going to have to govern on it. So, Joann Ariola, we appreciate it very much.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
All right, coming up, Gavin Newsom must have forgotten what it says in the Constitution about guns. That's next in our 2A Tuesday. Oh, earlier today also, folks, we received some very sad news, unfortunately. Frequent Newsmax guest Michael Reagan, the adopted son of President Ronald Reagan, has unfortunately passed away on Sunday. Reagan was a prolific author and talk show host. Michael Reagan passed away at 80 years old.
Hello everyone, I'm April Lufrew. Today we got the super popular Zippy Sweeper. It's an electric broom that sweeps up messes with its 360-degree swivel head and ultra lightweight design. The Zippy Sweeper is powered by a long-lasting rechargeable battery, and you can dump the dirt with just one click and no fuss. It's on Amazon for $109, but you get it here for just $59, and that's $50 off. And if you don't like it, send it back, and we'll even cover the cost of return shipping.
There are only a few men I'd trust with my life. Two of them built this wallet. I've known the guys behind Proof for nearly 20 years, and we've been through hell and back together. When they told me they were building the wallet, I just said, bill me now, I'm in. This isn't some fashion piece. This isn't just some trend. These wallets are a direct reflection of the kind of men who built it. It's built to last, built to function, and designed to carry everything you need and more. If anything happens to it, they'll take care of it. No questions, no fine print. If you knew the guys who created this wallet, you wouldn't carry anything else. Go check them out, because they built this thing right.
Don't kibble your dog.
Oh, hey, Dr. Marty.
Hey, Bat.
But what's wrong with this? It's premium stuff.
Let's check it out. It's still kibble, which means it's ultra-processed at extremely high temperatures that destroy the nutrients in the food. But at Dr. Marty, we gently freeze-dried premium meats, fruits, and vegetables, locking in their nutrients.
Never kibbled.
You got it, kid, and they're gonna love it.
I'm Eric. I'm a pilot. When I'm congested, I can't breathe, I can't sleep. But I can't tell my passengers I can't fly today. That's why I Navage. I've tried nasal sprays, but with Navage, I have the power to remove congestion fast by flushing out germs, mucus, bacteria, and viruses through powered suction in like 30 seconds. I can see the results. I can feel the results.
This cold season, get #1 doctor-recommended Navage, available online and in store.
As a neurologist, my patients are often concerned with age-related memory decline. I recommend Cunol Brain Health with 2 powerful, high-absorption ingredients clinically shown to improve memory, focus, attention, and more. Cunol, the brand I trust.
It's time to celebrate with Omaha Steaks end-of-season event. For a limited time, we're offering 50% off site-wide. That's 50% off all your favorites, like our Butcher's Classic Assortment, including our USDA-certified tender filet mignon and top sirloin fillets, plus chicken, pork chops, desserts, and more, all for just $99.99. Plus, you'll get 8 burgers free when you visit omahasteaks.com/TV today.
You got better things to do than clean out clogged gutters. Call Leaf Filter today and never clean out clogged gutters again.
Leaf Filter's technology keeps debris out of your gutters for good. Guaranteed. Call 833-LEAF-FILTER today or visit leaffilter.com.
Man, we've had a lot in this show today. It's 2-8 Tuesday, though, so let's do some gun stuff. Republicans have proposed to give the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, $378 million more than Trump requested. You want to know why I hate the ATF? Because they are the agency that spawned from the same federal agents that poisoned people during Prohibition. They literally killed people for consuming alcohol when it was illegal. They deliberately poisoned alcohol, so when it was consumed, people died. Why would you give them any more money, especially more than they're asking for? Cam Edwards, host of the Bearing Arms and Cam & Company podcast, and AWR Hawkins, Second Amendment columnist at Breitbart News. Cam, this is like, give them a nickel.
Well, you know, Donald Trump was even going to give him more than $1 billion, right? But it was a $400 million cut to the ATF's budget that Trump was requesting, from $1.6 billion down to $1.2 million. Republicans, again, they want to trim, 20 or 30 million from the ATF's budget. I got to tell you, Carl, I can't understand why they would want to fund this agency more than Donald Trump does, but I hope this gets pulled out.
Which AWR, it's completely inconsistent with what he's literally been doing.
Right. No, I'm like Cam, though. I hope it gets pulled out. I mean, but it is ridiculous. Even though we have different leadership in here than we had under Biden, who knows what leadership we'll have if a Democrat can win again. And we need to set the precedent that we cut, that ATF literally, that they don't get to go in restaurants unless they're working a side job in restaurants because they don't have enough money to do it. That's the precedent we need to set. We don't need to be dumping millions upon millions upon millions of dollars into their budget.
No, I don't think so. I mean, we could totally do without that agency, especially now that the NFA is going to get nixed. All right, Cam, Gavin Newsom's press office has responded to the Ninth Circuit Court, of all places, who has ruled against the California's open carry ban. Now, Newsom saying, quote, California just got military troops with weapons of war off the streets of our cities, but now Republican activists in the Ninth Circuit want to replace them with gunslingers and return to the days of the Wild West. Well, hell yes, I do. And also the Constitution works. I mean, like, I'm gearing up for my own fight on this in Connecticut. I live in the Constitution state with, you know, you can't even carry a gun openly because they took it away. Like, it doesn't say in the Second Amendment you have to conceal it.
It doesn't. It's the right to keep and bear arms. And actually, this Ninth Circuit opinion makes the case that that open carry is what is protected by the Constitution. Concealed carry may be the dominant practice these days, but when you go back and you actually look at the history of gun ownership, it was open carry that was explicitly protected. But, you know, listen, Carl, you and I both know whether you're carrying openly, whether you're carrying concealed, people who bear arms lawfully are not causing a lot of crime, right? And in the wake of California having to get rid of its May issue concealed carry system, what's happened? Crime has dropped. What happened in Baltimore where they had to get rid of their May issue system where nobody could get a permit? Crime dropped, right? New York City talking about biggest crime drop in decades. After they were told you've got to let people start carrying firearms because it's their constitutional right to do so.
Yeah.
So we've got case after case after case of concealed carry or open carry not causing problems. So what is Gavin Newsom talking about?
Yeah, he never knows what he's talking about, especially when he's at the French Laundry with no mask on. This North Carolina state rep, though, says, AWR, that gun owning is not actually a God-given right in the Constitution. Roll this.
And stop thinking that somehow owning a gun and possessing a gun is a God-given right from the U.S. Constitution or the North Carolina Constitution. It's not. It is not a God-given right.
Lady will suspend momentarily.
She's a moron, but also, if someone breaks into your house, call a social worker then.
Well, on a technicality, she has one point. It is not a God-given right from the Constitution. It's a God-given right from God. That's what she misses, and that's what our founders understood. The right to self-defense existed before North Carolina, United States were even thought of. It is a natural right, God-given, and the tool with which we most often exercise that right is not just a gun, but a handgun. So says Justice Samuel Alito in McDonald v. Chicago. So she's just going to have to take a walk on this one. And I love that the video is out of her saying this so it can live on forever. Because if any one natural right is not God-given, if any one is not God-given, then none of them are. And that means we are in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, look, I always just simply say, like, I think maybe voting and buying a gun should have the same restrictions. But, I mean, they'd call me crazy. Anyway, AWR, that's a sweet cactus in the background, by the way. I like those. I don't even know where you are.
That's just for you in Scottsdale, Arizona today. I thought you'd like it.
Yeah, fun fact, Arizona, you can shoot on public land if it's not posted. Pretty neat. AWR, Cam, we appreciate it.
Thanks, Carl.
All right, before we go, President Trump brings the House down during his address to Republican lawmakers for 90 minutes, but we have some awesome highlights next.
The press won't report the real story.
The American people are actually very smart.
Ridiculous statements.
These guys are just plain weird.
Actual scandals.
Even the immunity decision. I mean, that decision was so misreported.
That's my job, and I aim to do it every night.
Do you have a yo-yo smile? Sometimes yellow, sometimes white. It's a constant battle between everyday stains and whitening treatments. Until now, get Smile Actives, the daily teeth whitening breakthrough that gives you a more youthful smile and helps you keep it.
At 43 years old, I don't mess around with products that waste my time. Smile Actives is easy, and it works. No gloopy trays, no messy strips. Just add a little bit on top of your toothpaste when you brush your teeth. And ta-da, white teeth.
Just add Smile Actives to your favorite toothpaste and watch the magic happen. Our patented Polyclean microfoam lifts away deep stains for a dramatically younger and whiter smile.
You have a choice. You can have those yellow teeth and just be old Nana or Pop-Pop, or you can be smiling and dazzling, full of confidence. I love my white teeth.
Scan, click, or call for your whitest smile yet. And if you order right now, we'll double your whitening free. Get an extra Smile Actives as our free gift to you, but only while supplies last.
I drink coffee
every day. I started noticing that my teeth were not as bright as I'd like them to be, a little dingy, but Smile Active, it works. Got your boy gleaming.
100% of users saw whiter teeth. Smile Actives lifts away even the toughest stains from coffee, wine, and food, gently restoring your bright, youthful smile. Plus, it's safe for veneers, crowns, and dentures.
It's really a no-brainer if you want to whiten your teeth.
Clinically shown to brighten your teeth 5 shades whiter in just 7 days.
If you could use something so easy like Smile Actives to take yellow teeth to white teeth, why wouldn't you?
Act now. Get Smile Actives for just $24.95 and we'll double your order free. But hurry, this deal won't last. Smile Actives is guaranteed to work. Whiten your teeth or get your money back. No questions asked. Don't wait. Get Smile Actives for just $24.95 and we'll send you a second bottle absolutely free. That's free shipping. A free extra bottle. That's an incredible 58% savings. Scan the code, go to smileactives.com or call to get your beautiful whiter smile now.
Nearly home. Whodunit?
We're looking for a house closer to everything, but we don't know where to start.
Find it with Realtor.com. With Real Commute, it's easy to find a home closer to what's ever close to your heart. Do y'all recycle? Realtor.com.
She's been there for you through everything. And now you're learning this next thing together. We get it. Find a caregiver who does too. When it's not you, it's care.com.
I never considered myself an alcoholic, but drinking affected my job, health, and relationships. A powerful medication helped me take back control. Now I no longer feel the urge to drink, and the same pill that helped me could help you. Text Newsmax to 710-710 to learn more.
At Consumer Cellular, we only hire real humans right here in America.
I'm in America.
But can you help people find a wireless plan that's exactly right for them?
That's human work, at least at Consumer Cellular.
That's why we're ranked #1 in customer satisfaction.
I wish I was human.
Hey, don't worry.
Yeah, we don't know how to go beep, bop, boop.
Beep, bop, boop.
See, look at you.
Yay!
Get the carrier ranked #1 in customer satisfaction and your second month free. Call Consumer Cellular.
I still love to surf, snowboard, and of course skate. So I take Cunol Magnesium to support my muscle and bone health. Cunol's high absorption magnesium glycinate helps me get the full benefits of magnesium. Cunol, the brand I trust.
Well, President Trump today held another marathon event, speaking in front of House GOP members. And if you don't know any better, you'd think it's like a stand-up comedy routine at times. Roll this.
I don't like to travel. But when I travel, I make a lot of money for the country. Do you think Walz could pass a cognitive test? Do you think Kamala could? I don't think Gavin could. He's got a good line of crap, but other than that, he couldn't pass. I know it's not nice to say that. These people are a mess. Where do they find these people? They're the worst looking people I've ever seen. She actually said, could you imagine FDR dancing? She said that to me. Let's assume I was allowed to run. I could have, there's going to be a constitutional movement.
Rob, it's just like the guy goes no script for like 90 minutes on just the funniest stuff you ever heard.
It's the best. Did you see the candlelight vigil, the January 6th candlelight vigil? I mean, I'm watching, I'm like, I can't imagine a bigger group of just
You almost said it.
Clowns. I wanted to say something really bad, but I'm like, this is not a serious group of people, not even by any measure. So
Rob, enjoy.
He is great. I mean, that was probably a 30-minute speech. It went 90 because he was off the cuff the whole time. Good to see you, Carl.